Today, we are joined by three amazing stars from the SEN team that we have training and teaching at Purple Ruler. And what we wanted to do is just go around quickly, introduce everybody. First, we have Shiham. Hi, Shiham. Can you just quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Shiham, and I am a teacher at Purple Ruler as well as helping with school administration. So double whammy there. I specialize in primary education.
And then we have Sam as well.
Hi. So yeah, I'm a teacher here at Purple Ruler as well, and I specialise in primary education.
Fantastic. And then we have Daisy. Hi, Daisy.
Hi. So I'm a tutor at Purple Ruler. I graduated from psychology, and majority of my experience is in ABA tutoring with students who have autism spectrum disorder and other developmental disorders.
Tell me about some of the SEN sort of students that you've worked with before. You know, what kind of learning needs and disabilities have you found? Let's start with Shiham.
In South Africa, our special needs schools are very full. So we have what we call full service schools, which has all the OTs, the psychiatrists, the learning support teachers there at the school, but it's still a mainstream school. So we accommodate SEN learners. So that's where I got majority of my experience. Every year, of course, at least 3 to 4 children with ADHD, autism I also had in that class. And then, of course, dyscalculia. I had in 1 year 2 students with dyscalculia, so their maths ability was on like stage, I would say, reception or beginning of reception year, and they just couldn't go any further. And then I had a lot of students who were on the spectrum, so they were getting tested as psychiatrists, they were going to the OT, but they weren't diagnosed yet. So they were waiting for their diagnosis so they could go on the waiting list for the schools.
I think in that scenario, definitely we learn as they do, don't we? Just as we're going through the process. But that's fantastic. Okay, thanks, Shiham. What sort of qualifications or experience do you feel that is quite important to have in this field?
Yes, I think qualifications and experience is really important to have, like, together, synthesizing the two, because I found there was a big difference between what I was learning in books versus what I was actually learning in the classroom. So things would be implemented that I had learned about, but it's about how you do it, which can't necessarily be taught in a book.
What would you say are the most interesting and challenging things that you found generally from working with SEN pupils?
So for me, the most challenging thing was the behaviour. Obviously, it is quite difficult. And when I was first learning in this environment of how to deal with these things, it was a big learning curve for me, because I've worked with students before and it's just been as simple as like, here's a piece of work, do the work, and then we'll carry on. But when I was working with students with autism spectrum disorder and then other developmental disorders, the motivation really comes into it. So I had to start implementing things like token economies, where it's like, okay, we're going to do 10 smiley faces and then we can go dance, or we can go read a story, something like that, something to keep the motivation up and make sure they're actually enjoying what we're doing. Because I found if I tried to do anything super rigid and not make them, but like really try and have something done that I want done, the motivation just isn't there and things don't run as smoothly as they should.
Well, I actually have the opposite of Daisy. I never had a problem with motivation of the kids. They always wanted to learn. That was one thing I never had a problem with. I was always surprised. They always like, teacher, teacher, no, I can do it. I've got it. And that was something that really inspired me, like, because a lot of the times they say children with SEN needs or SEND needs, they don't have the motivation or they don't want to. But I found it completely opposite, that they just wanted to learn, they wanted to know. So that was something insightful that I learned while I was there. I didn't have as many behavior issues, I would say, as Daisy, but I think that was most like aha moment for me. I was like, wow, they do want to learn, they do want to try and better themselves. It wasn't, I was lucky, I think, maybe, that in my 4 years.
Yeah.
Were you surprised by that, Shiham, that they were so, enthusiastic and engaged?
Yes, because with what we learned when obviously I did my degree in psychology, they always highlighted that motivation was going to be a problem. Like you need to motivate them or whatever. So when I got in the class and, you know, I try to help them and be like, oh no, teacher, I got this. A lot of they always wanted to try first before I helped them. Obviously, and they needed individual attention, but they were always willing to try first and then kind of call me to help them.
And Sam, what about you?
So I think in terms of challenging aspects, I struggled a lot with catering with different needs all in one class and just trying to make it accessible for lots of different children. And that's what I really like about online teaching, is that you can really focus on that one child or that small group of children and really get to know them and their needs and their interests. Because coming back to motivation, I find that if you can base it around their interests, you can really help with that motivation. Yeah, I taught a boy who was on the autistic spectrum and he hated reading. He didn't like reading at all. And this was actually in-person teacher. So we were in the library and I said, okay, you don't like this book, which he had chosen from this box that he was supposed to choose from. This was his level. Well, let's have a look around and see if we can find you a different book. And he looked around and he saw this massive fact book and his eyes just lit up. And it was amazing. And he read so much that day. And it's just knowing their interest to be able to engage them and create that motivation. I think that's really important, and yeah, was an insightful lesson for me.
Liberation is in there, isn't it? Giving them a chance to actually go out and find their own interests and sort of bring it back and let's work with this. Yeah. Great. Okay. So what about when you've had to translate doing physical lessons into suddenly working online? What would you say is the best way to sort of channel and use those skills in that transferable way?
Yeah, so most of my teaching comes from in-person lessons. So I've done one-to-one specialised SEND teaching, and I've also done whole class teaching. But becoming a tutor has meant I've had to sort of adapt my strategies to suit an online classroom. So I think it's just making small adjustments to cater for like the individual needs. So, you know, if your student has dyslexia, making sure you've not got just plain white backgrounds, having a coloured behind the text can help them. Or one thing that I think is really important for both physical and online is setting a routine, especially for students with autism spectrum disorder. So when I was in an actual physical classroom, I'd have a visual timetable with images so they knew where they were throughout the day. But in my online lesson, I've started incorporating like a little icon just to show the student whereabouts they are in the lesson. So they can say, oh, okay, I'm at the 5 questions at the end now, so I know that the lesson's nearly finished. I know where I am, I know what I'm doing, and I feel safe in that. So that was one thing that I've sort of translated from my in-person teaching to my online teaching. Yeah, and just, as I said before, learning their interests. I think that's something that you can really incorporate into any type of teaching.
Yeah, so for me, very similar things to as Samantha said. Something I've started to implement in my lessons is having different expectations. So I'll always, in like the warm-up activity, I'll try and gauge how they're feeling. So if I've got like classroom question of the week or a game or something like that, I'll gauge how they're feeling from their answers. Because if they're really talkative, really animated, I'm like, okay, we can get a lot more done. Whereas if we're doing the questions or the game and everyone's a bit like, then I try not to throw as much stuff at them, as much learning at them. Especially with SEN students, it can be quite difficult because you're expecting them to have their headphones on, you're expecting them to watch the screen. Sometimes they're out in a hallway, so you're expecting them to listen, but then there's so much stuff happening behind them and all around them. And I always try and make sure that the work is engaging and fun, and I try and blur the lines between learning and what they like as well. So a class that I had, the learning outcome was to write a paragraph, but I didn't tell them that. I told them they needed to design a superhero and then write about what their superhero was doing, which ended up in a paragraph, which was amazing.
Yeah, it's really nice when you actually see kids learning and they're not realizing that. And when they do realize they're
Yeah,
learning,
exactly.
it's
They
fun,
were
they get
loving
quite
writing
upset.
about their superheroes. They were
Yeah.
loving writing about the superheroes, but I didn't dare say, like, today we're writing paragraphs, because it would have been like, oh, I don't want to write paragraphs.
So in terms of people taking part and learning about SEN and teaching SEN, what extra things do you think we need to be doing to keep on top of the needs of the SEN learner?
Well, usually I will, I'm what we call like a deep dive researcher. So I will, type it in how to accommodate SEN learners in the classroom, for example, and then I'll read multiple different articles. So I think it's taking all that information once you've Googled and you've deep dived like I do, and then making it your own. Personally,
Right, I love that. I love the idea of a deep dive into the realms of academic. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Part of my CPD is I'll find a lot of resources and I'll pop them in the group chat that we have. All these different things that work really, really well compared to like a boring PowerPoint or something that I would have done like months ago. Now I've developed it and my lessons are a lot more interactive and I think a lot more fun as well.
What tips and tricks do you guys use to sort of keep that pizzazz going and getting the pupils to be actually really taking notice and not sort of just drifting off?
I think some of it comes from your style of teaching, having, open body language, being really enthusiastic and encouraging to the pupils, and sort of listening to them both, like what they're saying and their body language as well. Are they fidgeting? Are they uncomfortable? Are they enjoying it? Are they engaged? And thinking about what that behavior that they're showing is saying to us. Are they struggling with the work? Is it too difficult? Do I need to take a step back and go back over what we was doing before? And just listening to them and what they need. If they are fidgeting, maybe including more like kinesthetic based learning where they can move and hold up things or move things about on the screen. Just that sort of learning might be better for them, and just thinking like that, always thinking about what they need.
Very, very similar to what Samantha said, completely led by them and how they're feeling and trying to gauge how they are. Online, sometimes it can be a bit tricky about knowing when to push them and when to actually take a step back. And some things I like to do is, as I said before, I like to have like really fun activities. So it could be like a funny video, or it could be a song and getting them to sing along as well. Something different other than like trying to write different things or trying to learn spellings to make it fun.
What sort of resources would you guys say are really useful?
So I read a book quite a while ago and it's just sort of stuck with me. And it's called Know Me to Teach Me, and it's by a lady called Louise Bomber. And she talks about how we support children with adverse childhood experiences or trauma. And I found this really, really powerful. And actually, you can apply it to all children, and especially children with special educational needs or disabilities. And she talks about increasing these, I think she calls it felt safety cues, which means making your students feel safe by varying your tone of voice like a storyteller, or being open and warm and building that rapport with all of your students. And things as well, like giving them choices and control in their lessons. And the other thing from that book that I took away was she talks about how behavior is like communication. And so understanding why a student might be showing these negative behaviors and understanding their voice and what's upsetting or frustrating them, and not just jumping to here's a negative behavior, here's a consequence. It's thinking deeper than that. And actually, I have the book here and I found a quote that I found really, really powerful, if I'm okay to share that.
Please do. Yeah.
So she says, a pupil's behaviour is communication, the beginning of a conversation. As educational staff, we need to involve ourselves in this conversation. A conversation is a two-way interactive process. And I found that really insightful, I guess, into how we can sort of think about behaviour.
I think something to add is, if you are taking a class with SEN learners, is to have fun with it.
Thank you very much, guys, today for joining me. Really enjoyed talking about SEN. Great, and we'll see you next time on SchoolWise Research with James Kidd.